So I wanted to move on the history of Memorial Day. So Memorial Day is celebrated to pay condolences, as I said before, to those who have dedicated their lives for their country. More especially for those who died during the Korean War. And Myunghyun, could you give us a little quick introduction on the Korean War for our listeners?
Korean War, or in Korean, 한국전쟁, started in June 25th, 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea. Actually, we call them 6.25 전쟁 because it broke out on June 25th, so it's 625.
Okay, 625.
Yeah, so this was the first military action of the Cold War.
I see. So the Cold War is actually talked about a lot, and along with the Korean War, but maybe some people don't know that it's actually kind of related.
Yes, the North Korea was backed by the Soviet Union and China, while the South was backed by the United States and the United Nations.
I see. So, Korea was kind of almost like battlefield maybe, and you had these superpowers that are trying to control this country in a way. And with all these countries involved, how exactly did it come about in conclusion, or how did it end?
Actually, the Korean soldiers and the UN soldiers marched up north, and the Chinese soldiers came down from the north. So it ceased fire in 1953. However, the first memorial ceremony for soldiers who died in the war was held in 1956. So it's 3 years after the war ended. So it was later declared a public holiday in the same year, just 3 years after the war. Yeah.
Right. So it was one of the most darkest probably moments in Korea. And I heard that there were a lot of casualties from the Korean War.
Yeah, well over 130,000 South Korean armed force members died in the Korean War. And Koreans also fought in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other countries over the years. So this Memorial Day commemorates those who were killed in those wars or fought in those wars.
I see. So actually this holiday is not only commemorating the people that fought in the Korean War, but Korea also was involved in a lot of other battles in other countries as well. So this honors all of the veterans that had fought for their country. And the numbers that you mentioned, 130,000, it's quite a lot for this one war. And actually, if we talk about the combined casualties, then it would be 175,000 people in total, not just Korean soldiers. So other people like civilians and other nationalities, 175,000 people who died during the Korean War.
Yeah, the Korean War is arguably the biggest historical event in Korea in the past century, especially because the 1953 armistice was never signed by South Korea. Therefore, the split of the peninsula along the demilitarized zone or the DMZ zone is still alive.
I see. And actually, this is really what makes South Korea very different from other countries where it's divided into two and where the war technically is still ongoing.
Yeah, 70 years after the war began, Korea is still divided.
Yeah, this kind of fact is kind of sad to me sometimes to see that. And, other countries, I think, might have had some history like this in a similar situation where one country is divided. Can you give us some intel on that?
For example, China and Taiwan are officially one China, so one country. So Taiwan could not participate in the Olympics by the name of Republic of China, which is their official name since the 1970s. But they have separate governments which have effective control over their territory and their own people. So from an outsider's perspective, they can be viewed as divided, I think.
It's confusing because probably people that watched the Olympics recently, right? They can see two different teams competing, but then in some broadcasts, they say, they don't say Taiwan, actually. I don't know if you saw. Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
It's Taipei, I think.
Yeah, something like that. It's
Chinese Taipei.
Right. And other countries, too, that China has a whole, like Hong Kong maybe, too. It's very kind of a sensitive issue like that. It's interesting to hear.
It is very sensitive even to say that they're divided.
Yeah,
because
depending on who you talk to
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
they will be very defensive and say, oh, well, that country is part of this country and so forth, or this country is separate from this country. So,
it is confusing.
yeah, it's confusing.
And in the past, like Germany, Vietnam, Yemen, all those countries were all divided, but now they are all unified. And it is interesting how these countries were divided mostly between a communist government and a liberal government.
Right. So it's if history can kind of replay itself later, I'm hoping maybe eventually Korea has in the future be able to unify just like these other countries.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that it is possible, right? These other countries were divided as well, and it took a while for them to become one. So there's definitely hope for that too.
Yeah.
And since the North and the South Korea is currently divided, I want to hear about your feelings a little bit more as a native here in Korea. Are they different countries? Are they two different countries? I mean, it's on paper or it's in public programs and stuff. But I heard that some Koreans feel that, they are like a brother or sister country.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're... The official stance of the Korean government is that the countries are not divided and there is just one Korea.
Okay.
So South Korea's constitution states that South Korea's territory stretches over the peninsula, including the northern part, which is currently ruled by the North Koreans. But personally, I feel that it is now hard to say that the countries are one. North Korean government has control over its own territory and own people. It has also established diplomatic relationships with some 160 countries. But I'm really sad that the country ended up divided. I feel, as you said, I feel like they are my brothers. It was mostly due to the particular political situation at the time. The people of both Koreas did not want to be separated.
Right.
So stories of family reunions decades after the wars were really tragic. They're really happy and sad at the same time to see their families again, but then have to separate again. So also the economic and political situation and human rights situation in North Korea is not very positive. So I really feel sorry for them.
Yeah, and hopefully, one day there is a moment that we can all witness that families will be reunited and government can be at peace with both countries. And since we are talking about Memorial Day and the history behind it, Memorial Day honoring people or Korean citizens that have served for their country. So, it's hard to understand, is Korea separated? Are they the same people? Are we one country? And Memorial Day is kind of celebrating those that have died serving their country. So could we consider that Memorial Day is celebrated between both Koreans in the North and South, those that have served their country?
I'm not so sure, but I don't think so. Because Memorial Day is to honor and remember the soldiers who fought in Korean War against the North Koreans. And if we start honoring North Korean soldiers, then it would be to honor those who killed our own soldiers, who we honor. So it is very contradictory.
Right. I can understand that. And if I had to put in my 2 cents, I guess I want to say, sometimes soldiers are put on the front line. And at times, they don't really know what they're fighting for, right? They're just fighting because government is telling them to fight. So they're sacrificing their lives for a battle that they're actually being used sometimes maybe to fight a war. So I think that it could go both ways. I think still honoring someone that fought in the battle for their country is still something, but it depends on which side you are on or who you're talking to. So it's a sensitive topic, but I think it's good to discuss. So actually, we talked a lot about North and South Korea along with Memorial Day and the war as well as the feelings towards this split.
Yeah, it's rare to have this kind of deep conversation, and which is very contradictory. And so it was interesting to talk about this topic.
Yeah, as you had said, it's kind of rare because, when you're doing this kind of research and you're reading it, it's hard to understand it very deeply, right? But in order to have someone to talk to, then we can actually discuss our own opinions and also other factual things that we have found.
Yeah.
So to conclude, actually, what is maybe one takeaway that you would like viewers and our listeners to take away from today's podcast?
I hope they learn some things about the Korean War, which is one of the main reasons for the division of Korea.
Right. Actually, I agree with you because a lot of people nowadays, when they think of Korea, they only think of maybe some pop culture or some famous companies. And actually, the history of Korea really builds its cultures and its traditions. So I hope, our viewers and our listeners, besides being interested in Korea's pop culture and so forth, if they ever get a chance to come, they can also dig a little deeper in the Korean history. So I really want to thank you, Myunghyun, for taking your time out of your day to join us today.
Yeah, it was my honor. It was my first time doing a podcast, so I was really nervous.
I think you did really good, so thank you. It was really enlightening to have someone from Seoul National University. Guys, if you don't know, that is like Harvard of America, so we have a very smart person with us today.
So I had fun talking to you about this topic.
I'm glad. And actually, this concludes our third episode, which has been quite special. And I wonder, if we have any more surprising guests on our next episode. So make sure to stay tuned for next week on the MIKU Podcast. See you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.